Welcome to legendary investor Jim Rogers, everyone. Now, where do I start? For those of you who don't know him, Rogers has an unrefuted passion for investing and is renowned for his ability to make money, and lots of it. Having worked alongside names like George Soros and made consistently handsome returns over the years, an eye-watering 4,200%, for example, over a 10-year period compared to the S&P's mere 47%, he's even founded his own index. Yes, the Rogers International Community Index. But it doesn't end there. Jim's written a multitude of books, including The Adventure Capitalist, and is featured twice in the Guinness Book of Records for his world trip covering 100,000 miles across 6 continents on a motorcycle, and more recently, his trip around the world in a custom-made Mercedes. Jim now lives in Singapore and has done for the past 10 years. Jim, is it fair to say you're living the dream?
Well, I don't know, Robert. I'm delighted to be here. I'm certainly having fun. Delighted with my life so far. Just one small correction. I'm in the Guinness Book of Records 3 times.
Oh, wow.
But it doesn't pay the rent, Robert. So my mother liked it, but that's about the only good thing about it.
Well, you've had quite a journey so far, obviously, over the decades, and one might say you've been around the block. But how did you first get into trading and investing?
More or less by accident. I stumbled into a summer job on Wall Street when I was at university and immediately fell in love. I knew nothing about Wall Street except it was in New York somewhere and something bad had happened in 1929. But I immediately realized, oh boy, this is it. I'm not going to go to law school or medical school or business school. I've been looking for my passion, and here it is. They would pay me to know what was going on in the world and to be able to predict the future. I couldn't believe it. So I stayed.
Well, well done you, and I bet you haven't looked back since.
No, not at all.
Well, we had the pleasure of seeing you actually at, I think it was a money show event in London a couple of years ago, and you were very bullish about Asia and bearish about Europe. Do you still hold those sentiments?
Yes, I think you probably will too by now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see how the world is evolving. I moved to Asia 10 years ago because China is going to be the next great country in the world, whether we like it or not. You know, the assets are in Asia. The largest creditor nations in the world are China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, Singapore. I mean, the money's here. The ambition and drive is here. The United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. You can look out the window, Robert, and you'll see a lot more debtor nations.
Oh, yeah, around us.
Across the water from you, including where you're sitting. So, no, I'm glad I moved to Asia.
I bet you are, and it seems that a lot of money is moving from Switzerland right into Singapore, where you are right now. What do you think about North Korea? Just out of interest.
I'm very optimistic about the future of North Korea. I wish I could invest there. I'm an American citizen, so since I'm a citizen of the land of the free, we're not very free. We cannot do what we want. But dramatic changes are taking place. The kid is doing all sorts of new and different things, a little bit like where China was in 1981. It's starting to change. Very few people are aware of it, but it's going to be a major, major change over the next few years.
I bet, and suffice to say, be greedy when people are fearful and fearful when people are greedy. I think it was Warren Buffett who said that, actually. And it looks like you're really kind of surfing that wave.
Well, yes, but again, it's difficult for me because I'm an American citizen and Americans are not allowed to do a lot of things that other people are.
Oh, confound it. Well, we'll run up the same problems, quite frankly, with my British passport. It's getting me less and less access now we've Brexited formally from the EU. So, Jim, for those people who don't know you, describe your edge in the market. How do you spot opportunities?
Well, I sometimes get it right, Robert. I guess it's because I try to find things that are ignored. I'll start with things that are cheap, and if they're cheap, it's probably because they're ignored. People are not paying attention to what's going on, and if you can find things like that where positive changes are taking place, you're probably going to make a lot of money. And even if you don't, you're probably not going to lose a lot of money because you bought it when it was cheap. But if the changes do take place, things usually go up a great deal by the time everybody realizes what's happening.
Yeah, I can understand that. And would it be fair to say that the less glamorous industries like the nuts and bolts cogs and widgets are more attractive than your Coca-Cola. Those industries or brands that have already been saturated have made it to, say, the top of the Dow 30.
Well, that's why those things are usually cheap, because nobody's paying much attention to that sort of thing. But if you can find them and you find the positive change, you're probably going to do okay.
Yeah, I can understand that. But I mean, in terms of your journey, Jim, I mean, I'm sure it hasn't been a complete walk in the park. I mean, every self-made millionaire, billionaire um, has undoubtedly had failure in their lives at some point. What big setbacks did you have along the way, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, well, Robert, no, I certainly, we could write a whole book about my mistakes. Let me tell you about my first wife. What a
Mm.
disaster that was.
Ah.
For instance, it's interesting. I ran into her the other day quite by accident, and I was so appalled that I had ever been married to her in the first place, and so happy that I was no longer married to her. Although at the time when we split, I was unhappy about it. So no, I made many mistakes. Early in my career, at one point, I had a spectacular success when everybody around me was losing their shirt, but then hubris set in, and 5 months later, I lost everything I had. So no, I've made plenty of mistakes.
Hubris, that's a very good word you've used, and it's one which is underrated actually, or underused in the mainstream media. I mean, would it be fair to say that hubris is what's going on right now with, say, for example, the FTSE breaking new highs and the Dow making new kind of like swing highs as well?
Well, yes, there is a lot of hubris in the world. At worst, at best, it's complacency, and everybody thinks this is easy. And don't worry, things are going to be fine. That usually sets us up for a problem down the road.
Yes, well, it'd be interesting to see what happens when interest rates invariably increase. I mean, you would expect a mini crash, for example, or a retracement.
Well, eventually, yeah. I mean, we in America, we'll use that as an example. We've had financial problems, economic problems every 4 to 8 years since the beginning of the republic. We don't have to have them for every 4 to 8 years, Robert, but we have. So we're going to have another one. Now, I should hasten to tell you that Janet Yellen, who's the head of the central bank in America, has publicly and officially stated we will never have economic problems again in the United States. So you should take what I say with a grain of salt, because she says I'm totally wrong. But if we do have another one, which I suspect, it's going to be the worst in our lifetimes, because in 2008, Robert, as you know, we had a problem. It was caused by too much debt. Well, the debt is much, much, much higher now all over the world. So the next time we have a problem, you should be worried. You should be very worried.
Yeah, I
But
bet.
Robert, it won't be a crash. Well, eventually it will. These things always start slowly. In 2007, Iceland went bankrupt. Well, most people never heard of Iceland, much less knew it could go bankrupt. But then a few months later, Ireland went bankrupt, and a few months later, Bear Stearns went bankrupt, and then Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And by then, everybody knew something was happening, and everybody knew there was a problem. That's when you get the crashes.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the Lehman Brothers were allowed to go bankrupt. I mean, the Federal Reserve, they can bail out anyone they want, and they don't even have to publicly announce who they've given and how much money to as well, which is very curious.
Well, yes, the Federal Reserve is in America. We've had three central banks. The first two disappeared for a variety of reasons. I suspect that this one will disappear too, because they keep making so many mistakes, doing so many outrageous things. Just since 2008, Robert, the balance sheet of the central bank in America has gone up by over 500 or 600%. That's in 9 years. I mean, this is unbelievable. It's preposterous. It never could have happened in history, but it has. And so when this bank, when the problems really hit, hopefully we'll get rid of this bank. A world without central banks, or a country without a central bank, has its own set of problems, but the problems from this central bank would be better off with no central bank.
The problem is the central bank itself, would it be fair to say?
Yes.
Well, in terms of creating your own reality, ignoring the external factor, or a realist and a pessimist would say that every situation, good or bad, has its own set of problems. Like, for example, in your case, traveling the world running a hedge fund. It sounds like the dream to many people, like myself, but what problems did that present and how did you overcome them?
Well, I will say that there was a survey done recently that the number one dream which people have in the world, not everybody's number one dream, Robert, but the dream which comes out on top in the surveys is to chuck it all, get in the car or the motorcycle, and head off around the world. So, yes, it certainly was a long-term dream of mine. I've done it twice, as you know, once on a motorcycle and once in a car, because I've had this 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 gypsy gene or this nut gene in me, and I've always wanted adventure and to see the world. So I've done it a couple of times.
You certainly have, and you've made it to the Guinness Book of Record 3 times, which is well, very very impressive, actually.
Well, as I say, it doesn't pay the rent. My mother liked it, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly good to see your name in print many times over. But bearing in mind, I mean, no one saw companies, just moving on to investment, companies like Google coming in 1998 and growing into the behemoth that it currently is, and the tech revolution of, say, Facebook, LinkedIn. What do you see as the next big opportunity? I mean, would you say it's, say, cybersecurity? I mean, we're seeing a lot more kind of hack attacks around the world.
Well, certainly cybersecurity has a gigantic future because this is a question of which happens first. The whole system collapses because something goes wrong on the internet, or enough people can ward it off and save us all. I suspect that we will have huge problems along the way, which will be solved or helped by the people who are good at the internet and cybersecurity, as you call it. Yes, that's got a wonderful, wonderful future. And other things on the internet, you know, everything we know is being changed. My young children will probably never go to a bank when they're adults. Probably never go to a post office. Maybe rarely go to a doctor. Now, the internet is changing everything we know, and so whatever you think is true today, Robert, is not going to be true in 2032.
Well, I remember you saying actually in 2012 in Forbes magazine, you said there's going to be a huge shift in American society and culture, and the places that are going to get rich, and the stockbrokers are going to be taxi drivers. Would it be, well, is it down to that, would you say? This technological revolution we're seeing, by and large?
Well, you can pick any year in history, Robert, 1900, 1920, 1936, if you pick it. And whatever everybody thought in that year was totally false in 15 years later. Just pick a year and see what people thought, or go back and look if you cannot remember or haven't looked it up, and you will see that the world changed gigantically 15 years later, and everybody thought something entirely different. That is happening now. It's always that. My point, though, it's always happened. It's happening now. Yes, we're all aware of Google and the things like that, but this sort of change, whether it's technology or society or economics, whatever it is, it's always changed. So yes, it's happening again.
Well, the author Robert Kiyosaki, actually, I don't know if you've heard of the story Rich Dad Poor Dad. He prophesies that any time round about now, when the baby boomers come to cash in their pensions, that there'll be a huge global crash in equities. This hasn't happened yet. I guess he didn't foresee that interest rates would be kept to pretty much zero or 1.25%, as currently the case in America.
Well, we did have a problem in 2008, 2009. Now, whether it's because of what he just said or not, who knows? But don't give up, Robert. We're going to have some serious problems in the next couple of years. Whether it's because we're all aging or for whatever reason, we're going to have problems.
Well, so a combative way of investing, bearing this in mind, Jim, would you say gold and silver? A few other things as well.
I own gold and silver, Robert. And I own a lot. And started buying gold and silver back in the 70s. Never sold any. But I haven't bought any serious gold or silver since 2010. I'm waiting for an opportunity. If gold goes under $1,000 per ounce, I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot more. If it doesn't, well, I've got some. I got enough. But if it goes under 1,000, I hope I'm smart enough to pile up and buy a lot of it. Because before this is over, Robert, gold and silver are going to turn into huge bubbles. They're going to go up a lot, get very overpriced, and a lot of money is going to be made. Because whenever people lose confidence in governments and or paper money, they have always bought gold and silver. Whether they should or not is irrelevant. That's what they've always done.
Well, we had a taste of that about 5 years ago, back in 2000. Well, the run from 2008 to 2012, an enormous spike in gold and silver. It was more than a spike, but now we're seeing the retracement, and those levels which you mentioned are actually in sight. So that could be a fantastic opportunity to buy. I'm currently long silver at the moment, but I've got, like you, I've got real faith in the value of gold and silver over the coming decades.
Well, I own plenty of it, as I said, and if it goes down again, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more.
I'm sure you will. Now, Jim, it takes a very different set of skills to make oodles and oodles of money, to maintaining a fortune. I mean, did you find this to be the case in your journey?
Well, I'm not as smart as other people, or not as skilled as other people. For me, it's just a question of a lot of hard work and being attentive to how the world is changing, looking at things that other people don't particularly want to look at.
Yeah, that's a big one, and echoes really what Warren Buffett said about being greedy when people are fearful and fearful when people are greedy. And certainly, when we look at the stock markets and the property prices, especially in London, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Yes, even when measured in a stable currency, it's certainly ridiculous. But don't worry, there'll be a chance to buy cheaper. Don't worry.
No, I'm pretty sure.
Not just in London, but a lot of places.
Well, I'm pretty sure the London property market is off your radar for that very reason.
Well, I'm not. I can't afford to buy anything in London, but I'm not looking there even if I could afford it.
That's probably a good thing. I think a lot of people at the moment are in wait and see mode post Brexit. And what is your view on Brexit? Do you have a view on Brexit, us leaving the EU? Do you think that's a great thing for the United Kingdom, or do you think it's self-sabotage?
Well, it doesn't matter what I think. It's a fact. It's going to happen, and one has to adjust to what the way the world is, not the way one wants the world to be. The UK is leaving. It may, and then the Scots may leave the UK. I mean, who knows what may happen? This has opened a can of worms, and if the Scots leave, boy, little England's going to have very serious problems because the Scots are going to take the oil with them. Scots are not going to leave and say, "Hey guys, you get our oil." So there'll be plenty of problems developing from Brexit.
Oh, there will be, and we've just had a taste of it this year. Prices soaring, and yeah, a lot of uncertainty as well. You're something of a role model, a very big role model, and certainly to a lot of listeners, people will invariably want to follow your footsteps to some degree. What pearls of wisdom specifically would you give to those people?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't follow my footsteps or anybody else. You're not going to be successful if you listen and follow other people. The only way the successful people in the world are the ones who stay with what they know and invest in what they know. Listening to hot tips on the internet, the radio, or the TV, or whatever usually leads to big losses. Everybody listening to this knows a lot about something, whether it's sports or cars or fashion or whatever. So just stay with what your passion is. If you're passionate about fashion, you're going to see changes long before I will, because that's what you're looking at all the time. You're reading about it, you're watching it. So when you see a big change, do some research and some homework, and you'll probably make investments, and that's how you're going to be successful. And by the way, when you do it, please contact me, send me an email so I can start looking at it too. But that's the way to be successful. Don't listen to people like me. Well, or anybody.
Focusing on your strengths as opposed to getting tips from newspapers and sites online, for example. It's a very easy way to lose a lot of money. Rest assured that as soon as you trade the tip, everyone else has piled in already, huh?
Yes, if you hear something down at the pub, just finish your beer and don't buy.
Do the opposite, huh?
Well, I'm not saying do the opposite. I'm just saying do nothing unless you yourself know a lot about it.
Yeah. Well, there's this famous story of like the Great Depression, or the Wall Street crash, sorry, and a broker basically hearing a checkout operator or till assistant saying that a stock was looking like a good buy, and the stockbroker immediately ran back to his office and sold his enormous position in that holding.
Well done.
Yeah. Now, can you name a specific book or resource that has had a significant influence on your success throughout the years? Anything in particular that stands out? I know you've probably read many, you've written a few yourself.
Well, back in the beginning, I read Graham and Dodd, the security analysis and the intelligent investor. I read The Money Game by Adam Smith, which taught a lot about some of the madness of markets. John Train had a book once called Famous Financial Fiascos, which is just full of all the things that can and have gone wrong in markets, especially when people think nothing can go wrong. Those are a few that I read and loved and made an impression.
Well, that's quite a reading list there for those people listening, and you can be rest assured you'll be having a lot of people buying those books off your recommendation. So, we appreciate your time, Jim, and I know you're a very busy man running this fund. So, for further information about what you offer, where can listeners find you?
Well, I don't have any clients, Robert, of any kind. I do have a few books I've written, as you mentioned, but I don't manage money for anybody except myself. So I'm afraid I'm not much use to anybody and don't have much to offer.
Well, I think you've offered a lot in this interview, and I thank you very much indeed. You've written The Adventure Capitalist, which is certainly a page turner. So, those people who want to find out more about Jim Rogers, head out and buy The Adventure Capitalist. You've written several more as well, haven't you?
Yes. My most recent was called Street Smarts: Adventures on the Road and in the Market. So yeah, no, I think I've done 6 books.
Okay, wow. Well, that's a lot more in a lifetime than many can achieve. So, thank you very much indeed for your time, Jim. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
My pleasure, Robert. Thank you.